Aloha. My name is Lori Yankura, and I'm one of the principal investigators for the Grandcares Project. And today I'll be talking about microaggressions in grandfamilies. On behalf of the entire Colorado State team and the team from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. And first, I'd like to also thank our funder, the United States Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, Children, Youth, and Families at Risk Sustainable Community Projects for their support and funding of this webinar, and also Ruth Wilson for her technical assistance with recording and posting the webinar. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Grandcares Project. The overall project has three aims. The first is to focus on grandparent self-care by offering the powerful tools for caregivers, 6-week class for grandfamilies to promote self-care practices and reduce stress while connecting grandparents to community resources. If you're not familiar with Powerful Tools for Caregivers, please go to powerfultoolsforcaregivers.org. Second, we'd like to address the needs of grandchildren in our program. We have created and are now implementing a 6-week course to build self-care and leadership skills among 9 to 12 years old. And then the last component of the Grandcares Project is the one that you're a part of right now. It's for service providers. We want to make sure that service providers are able to understand the unique challenges that grandfamilies face, and this specific webinar helps them understand ways to communicate more effectively with grandfamilies. So the purpose of this webinar is to help service providers communicate more effectively with grandfamilies. And to this end, we'll be talking about a concept that's been sort of a buzzword in the communication literature lately, and that's microaggressions. And some of you may be familiar with them. They're basically manifestations of prejudice targeted towards socially marginalized groups. And in many ways, grandparents raising grandchildren are one of those groups. Now, microaggressions may take several forms. They can be subtle remarks, more overt behavior, and then even characteristics of the environment. And interestingly, microaggressions are often invisible to both perpetrator and recipient. So people committing them might not even realize that what they're saying is harmful. And I think this will become apparent in some of the examples I have coming up. And those on the receiving end of microaggressions might not even register them as insulting. They just might feel even more powerless than they did before, or lonely or isolated. So why might grandparents raising grandchildren or grandfamilies be socially marginalized groups? The stigma appears to originate from two categories. The first category is related to the reasons why grandparents are raising their children. It relates to the circumstances surrounding the biological parents' inability to raise their children. These reasons often stem from personal problems such as mental health issues, drug abuse, incarceration, AIDS and HIV, and/or child abuse and neglect. The stigma associated with these reasons often sticks to custodial grandparents and newly formed grandfamilies. Further, custodial grandparents even tend to be stigmatized when the reasons they're providing care for their children are not considered to be socially acceptable or are viewed as preventable and within the grandparents' control. So whatever happens, whatever misfortune and challenges faced by the middle generation, tend to stick the entire family, and that's a source of stigma. The second source is that people don't understand the reality of the situation. The role of custodial grandparent is non-normative. Even grandparents who are raising their grandchildren due to socially acceptable reasons beyond their control, such as deployment or the death of their grandchildren's biological parents, may still experience stigma. Historically, grandparents have always been there to help raise grandchildren. The overall assumption is that grandparental care is in addition to, rather than instead of, parental care. To add to this stigma, grandparents raising grandchildren may then become isolated from friends and age-related peers because parenting tasks and other related responsibilities are not normative for their life stages. I was in a focus group once where the grandparent said that all her friends were going on cruises, and she couldn't do that because she was raising her grandchildren. So stigma may be particularly harmful when grandparents experience it from multiple contexts, including schools, other family members, and service providers. Each context in turn may contain many sources. For example, in the school context, grandparents might find that schools have changed a great deal since their children, meaning the grandchildren's parents, attended them. Further, grandparents may be unfamiliar with current curricula, procedures, and use of technology. They may also not believe they fit in with the other biological parents simply because of age or cohort differences. Even in states with consent laws that allow grandparents to enroll grandchildren in school, the grandparents are often excluded from the individual education plans, the IEPs for grandchildren who have special needs, because federal law requires legal guardianship and does not recognize some state level consent laws. Service providers who may hold misperceptions about the variability of grandfamily situations or do not have appropriate resources for the complicated situations may be another source of stigma. These providers may have ambivalent feelings about working with grandfamilies due to the increased time it takes to understand complex issues and triangulate services among 3 generations. Stigma from service providers may also be perceived on the part of the grandparents due to past experiences, which may have led them to believe that service providers prefer traditional foster care over kinship care. So these grandparents many are afraid that service providers will remove grandchildren from their care. Additionally, stigma may also come from other family members. For example, other adult children or siblings may be resentful of the time and resources that grandparents give to their custodial grandchildren, as they believe that it takes away from their own children's grandparent-grandchild relationship. Other families who have been previously harmed by the grandchildren's parents, or who see the stress grandparents are under when caring for a grandchild, might not provide appropriate support and further stigmatize grandchildren and are the children they are raising. So together, these varying types and sources of stigma may tend to words, behaviors, and environmental factors, in other words, microaggressions, that deliver underlying message that can be harmful to the health and well-being of grandfamilies. So here's some example of some microaggressions. And they can often be perceived as assaults, insults, and invalidations. And so these top 2 are seen as assaults. You are too old to raise children. You don't live with a real family, which might be said to a child. You can see these are directly coming right in someone's face saying, your situation is not right. But sometimes they're more subtle. The next 2 on the bottom are what we call micro-invalidations, a subcategory of microaggressions. And these are such when a medical clinic refuses medical care because the custodial grandparent does not have a legal relationship, or when a teacher sends home letters addressed to the parents of. It's sort of like telling grandparent that their situation isn't real, it doesn't matter. It's an anomaly rather than a real situation that they're dealing with. And then the last is a micro insult, and that's just a straight out um, insult based on stigma. Aren't you afraid that your grandchildren will end up just like your parents, their parents to the grandparents? Or you will end up just like your parents to the grandchildren? Or saying such things like, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. As you can see, none of these are very helpful in helping grandfamilies with their situation. So here's another example, just showing you that microaggressions invalidate experience. The woman on the left is saying, you do such a good job of raising your grandchild. I know how hard it is because I babysit my grandchildren and I am really tired afterwards. And the grandmother says, she has no idea what I'm going through. I can't send those grandchildren home. So we believe there are 3 key approaches service providers may utilize when working with grandfamilies. The first is recognizing biases and microaggressions. It's important for practitioners to know their own biases and to become aware of and teach grandfamilies about microaggressions. Practitioners are human and susceptible to prejudice and stereotypes, and this is often the case with working in older adults. It's important to meet each individual and family as unique, to listen to the facts surrounding each situation, and to understand the strengths and weaknesses of each grandfamily. Further, bringing microaggressions into awareness rather than accepting them as truth may allow individuals the chance to decide how they are going to react to them, whether they accept them as fact or challenge their validity. And we hope that grandfamilies do learn to challenge that validity. Secondly, providers can use strengths-based approaches and reframe situations. Strengths-based approaches may also provide a way to reframe what might be perceived as negative or stigmatic, and instead focus on the positive aspects of grandparent-headed households. As a result, grandparents might cultivate an attitude of acceptance toward the perpetrators, who are most likely ignorant of their wrongdoing. Spirituality may also be helpful in cultivating acceptance and even forgiveness of the microaggression. Finally, as service providers, it may be appropriate to convey to grandparents and/or grandchildren that they can terminate friendships with individuals who engage in microaggressions. And then thirdly, grandfamilies should be empowered to seek out and cultivate relationships and friendships that are both positive and meaningful. This may provide an avenue to develop counter spaces, which are physical or relational spaces where individuals are assured respite from microaggressions. Such counter spaces may include their own home, churches, centers, or support groups. Finally, self-care and collective organizing are other strategies the literature recommends for coping with microaggressions. Collective organizing to advocate for grandfamilies' rights is also helpful in assisting grandfamilies to combat the harmful effects of microaggressions. So the lesson of this webinar is we hope that you will work to raise awareness of microaggressions toward grandfamilies and promote understanding of their unique needs. This is the end of this webinar, but I wanted to remind you that we have additional webinar topics on our website, and we are always open to more topics. So if you'd like any more information, you can contact me. That's my contact information there, lorena@hawaii.edu, or view our project website at grandcares.colostate.edu. And if you have a little time right now, we would love for you to tell us what you think about this webinar, or even give us ideas for more, and you can click on this link. So on behalf of the entire GrandCares team, I say thank you, and we hope you learned something from this webinar.